everybody, this is Josh McKinney, and I just want to welcome you to episode 105 of the I Suck at Jiu-Jitsu show. Today, we're going to do one of my favorite things, and that's talk about jiu-jitsu. No, I'm just kidding. That is one of my favorite things, but we're going to be more specific. Talk about jiu-jitsu competition. Talk about some of the things that people don't think about when it comes to jiu-jitsu competition. So often we go in, we're getting ready for our first tournament, and we get all kinds of advice. Should we cut weight? Should we not cut weight? What should we think? How should our mindset be? What should we listen to? And I think sometimes you just kind of got to take those things with a grain of salt, because they often depend on the person. Should I cut weight? Well, it depends on the person. What music should I listen to? Well, it depends on who you are. What we covered today is what I consider 5 really important factors. We call them the 5 layers of jiu-jitsu competition, but these are just 5 really important things that you may not be mentioned, may have never been told about. And maybe it's just you kind of know about them, but they've never been defined in a certain way for you. Sometimes just adding a word to something you already know of, adding a definition to that makes it so much easier to have a good understanding of it. And so that's what we really try to do in today's episode. And we look at 5 layers of jiu-jitsu competition. This is the first time that I've ever done a piggyback episode. And so on last Saturday, on our Patreon page, an episode on pacing. Controlling the pace of a match, what that means, how to do it, and how to practice it. I did on our Patreon page, which is, so we call it, so the episode Suck Less Saturday, but our Patreon page is patreon.com/ISuckAtBJJ. And you can go there, you can check out any of the Suck Less Saturday episodes, and including the newest one, which is on pacing. And like I said, it is kind of the 6th layer of jiu-jitsu competition, and I wanted to kind of give something special to our Patreon guys. And so if you guys have not checked out the Patreon page, you absolutely should do it, because there is really good content on there already. I really hope that in the future, over the next couple months, there will be such a wealth of jiu-jitsu knowledge, jiu-jitsu understanding on it, that you could just sign up and start listening from episode 1 and feel really, really confident in your understanding of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. But that's all I'll talk about. The Patreon page. Let's just go ahead and jump right into the episode. Let's learn about the 5 layers of Jiu-Jitsu competition and how we can have a deeper understanding of them. Looking at the 5 layers of BJJ competition. So I could have probably done any order for the 5 layers of jiu-jitsu competition. And I just chose this order because, well, it's the order I chose. But what I'm saying is I think all 5 things are very similar in the amount of importance. And I think you should think of all 5 things as a whole. These really, this episode could have been like 5 things people don't think about before they compete. But I decided to go with layers. I must have been thinking about cake when I was preparing for this episode. But we are going to start where most people start when they think about jiu-jitsu tournaments, is they start with their preparation. And I really wanted to dig into what makes for good prep and why some prep is actually causing you, I wouldn't say causing you to lose, but it is lowering your chances of victory. A lot of people, most people that do jiu-jitsu, especially competitively, and I am guilty of this too. This isn't you guys do this. I do it too. We're obsessive, and we take that obsessiveness and we apply it to every aspect of life, especially jiu-jitsu. Jiu-jitsu is something you can really, really, really obsess about, because you can never learn everything, every aspect of jiu-jitsu. You cannot master it per se. And so that causes us to obsess a lot. The problem with that when it comes to jiu-jitsu competition is this is how we look at our prep a lot of the time, is like, okay, I feel good training 5 days a week. I should train 10 days a week or 10 times a week, because then I'll be getting good double the speed. I'll be progressing so much faster. I'll be better than everybody. And I will agree that most of the time, people that are on the mat more get better faster. But there is a point of diminishing return that you have to be thinking about. We have to be honest with ourselves and realize that most of the people that we watch on YouTube, most of the people that we watch on Instagram, most of the competitors that we see on Flow Grappling are on steroids. This is not an episode to say, oh, those people are cheaters and I hate them or anything like that. But it's not a level playing field. If you are listening to someone who tells you there's no such thing as overtraining and that you just got to tough through it and you need to deadlift more and you've got to be stronger and bigger and that's how you succeed in jiu-jitsu, and we all lift weights hard and we all train hard, that's if you want to be a good competitor, you have to do these things. If the playing field is not level, if you can train 3 times a day, and you can recover from that. If you can train 2 hard jiu-jitsu sessions in a lift and you can recover from that because you're on steroids, and you say, well, Josh, that's the reason that you're not at my level is because you don't train hard enough. Well, that's not true. That's only part of the argument. The truth is, I don't recover the same way you do. I have to look at that. If I don't look at that, I'm going to cause a lot of injury to myself. I've talked to you guys about the rib injuries that I've had pretty much this whole year. And the second one, I think, came from competing when I was injured, to be honest. But the first one came from overtraining. It came from, I actually remember I woke up that Monday before I injured my rib, and I go, man, I'm really exhausted. I don't have a lot of energy. But there were a few guys from out of town, and I had told them that I would be at open mat that day. And so I still went in, trained really hard, and popped my rib really, really bad. It was actually for the first 10 days. A lot of people always talk about man, I couldn't go to the bathroom. It's so hard when you have a rib injury. This is the extent of mine, is I couldn't flush my toilet without my rib popping out. I couldn't reach my hand out in front of me and generate any pressure with my hand. It would put too much pressure on my ribs and my rib would just pop out of place. But it was an overtraining injury. You have to look at your prep and acknowledge what you can actually do. If you can only train 3 days a week to prep for a tournament, then you can only train 3 days a week. If whatever physically or time wise, you have to say, all right, I can't just keep adding. Adding is not the only way to get good. Adding is not the only way to win tournaments. Because if you go in with that mindset that I'm just going to continue to add more and add more and add more, by the time you get to the tournament, generally you're injured. And when you're injured at the tournament, you're not going to perform well. And if you just don't feel good mentally, you're not going to perform well. And so it's just really important in our prep that we acknowledge what we can actually do. And we take note every time that we compete. So when I'm competing and I go, man, I trained 5 times a week for this tournament, that's the best I've ever felt. Well, maybe that is the perfect amount for me. Maybe I don't have to say I need to double my training to get better. Sometimes you get to these points of diminishing return. For example, I think a really common point of diminishing return that people run into is when they lift weights instead of training jiu-jitsu. I think you should lift weights. I absolutely think everyone should lift weights to supplement their jiu-jitsu in the sense of for injury prevention. Having more strength, having more muscle is going to help you prevent injury. Now, when you can't train jiu-jitsu because you're too sore from your workout, well, most likely that's diminishing return, right? I am looking at my training and saying, oh yeah, I'm going to feel good tomorrow when I actually get to train jiu-jitsu because I lifted today, but I can't perfect my technique tonight because well, I'm too sore, I'm too exhausted. And so you've got to look at your weightlifting routine. For me, I cannot lift more than 1 day a week because I lift very, very hard. The intensity is very high in my lifting, but it's 1 time a week. I need the rest of the week to recover from that to be able to do another hard lift. There are a lot of people that can get away with 2 times a week and they feel very good doing that. There are some people that get away with 3 times a week and they feel good lifting weights 3 times a week. Now, after that, I'm not saying if you have a buddy that lifts 4 times a week and he comes into jiu-jitsu as fresh as a daisy that he's on steroids, but he's on steroids and it's not even an argument. There's no question about it. Your boy is geared up. Don't take advice from that guy. You're going to, unless you're on 2. If you're on 2, take advice from steroid users. Don't take advice from Josh McKinney, who's not on. You want to know, you want to make sure your playing field is level in your preparation for the tournament. Something else, when we're talking about prep, it's not just all physical. There's a lot of mental prep that goes into a jiu-jitsu tournament. And one of the biggest mistakes that I think that there is a lot of people try to prepare themselves to not be nervous. They try all these different hacks and these different, and like, I'm a big fan of, and we'll talk about this in the warm up. I'm a big fan of Wim Hof breathing and breathing exercises when you warm up. But people think of that as, well, if I do that, I just won't get nervous. You will always get nervous in a jiu-jitsu tournament. Do not let your mindset prep be about not getting nervous. Have your mindset prep about how are you going to handle it when you are nervous. Just a little bit ago, I had Chris Wojcik on the podcast, and he was talking about his mindset and how the part of the brain that has to do with nervousness is also the same part of the brain that has to do with excitement. Your brain almost can't tell the difference between the two. It's how we look at that feeling. When it's bad, it's nervous, right? Something we're anticipating that is bad, we think of it as we're nervous. But something we anticipate as good, we think of as excitement. Reframing your thought process leading up to the tournament, instead of saying, I have to compete, I'm going to grind, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. You say, I get to compete. This is an awesome opportunity. I was having a conversation with my student, Brian. He got 3rd at PANS this year. And we were talking about it before, and I could see the nerves on his face. And I said, okay, I want you to think about this. I go, when you go back to work on Monday, whether you go out in the first round or whether you win this whole tournament, when you go back to work on Monday, there is not a single person at your job that had a cooler that had a cooler experience over the weekend. Gretchen from accounting could have skydove and then got a face tattoo, and still competing and fighting somebody at the PANS is a much cooler experience. You would kill Gretchen from accounting with a face tattoo in a fight, or as long as it was IBJJF rules. But reframing your mindset to do that. I remember telling this kid that, and his face went from like nerves to, oh yeah, this is just fun. I forgot. And he did great, and did better actually than he ever has at a tournament. And I think it's really important to reframe your mindset when you're going out to compete. You do not have to win. World hunger is still going to be there whether you win the world title or not. Nobody cares. Go out there and enjoy it for you. Competing is actually a much more selfish act than a lot of us think about. When I go to compete, I am actually sacrificing time away from my wife. I'm sacrificing time away from my team when I could be helping them prep. I am really focused on myself when I compete. It is a selfish act. I'm getting to go compete. I'm going to go do Worlds. The worst thing that could happen at Worlds is I could die. That's the joke my coach always makes. But no, the worst thing that can happen is I could lose. Maybe worst case scenario, it gets shared on the IBJJF and Flow Grappling Instagram pages, and it's me getting just beaten down. Honestly, That's happened to me before. Honestly, that's happened to me this year before. It's not that big of a deal. Go out and enjoy it. Go out and have fun when you are competing. Okay. So that is layer one. Layer one is your prep, your preparation. Layer two is your game plan. This we could have just included with preparation, but I thought 5 layers sounded better than 4. And so, and there's just a lot more content when we talk about game plan. So when we think about game plan, a lot of people just think about practicing a lot of technique. Understand, and we're going to get to this when we talk about the underlying goals of competing. Understand you're there to win. You are not there to win in any specific fashion. Sometimes we like to put those goals on ourselves, but that's not the job. The job is to get to the next round. The job is to get the gold medal. That is what we are there for. When we are out to compete, we're all trying to win matches. And so I don't just want to go in and say, okay, I'm going to know everything. I want to go into jiu-jitsu matches and say, what techniques do I know? What techniques can I use that give me the best chance to win this match? That doesn't always mean submitting people. Sometimes it does. Sometimes the best chance that I have in winning matches, when I was a purple belt, I talk about this sometimes, I pretty much only finished matches with triangles at all. Like there was nothing else. I did Chicago Open one time and I went 4 out of my 5 matches for triangle back to back to back to back. And the more that I did it, the better I got at it, the more confident I got at it. But then what started actually happening is I got to a point where I limited my game plan too much. And I didn't feel confident sweeping guys and getting on top and passing their guard. And that was a really big hole in my game. And so, because the triangle just stopped being available. So I had to sweep guys. People would pass so upright against me. They just wanted to avoid the triangle. Well, since I still did have good sweeps too, and I would sweep people, but then I would get on top and it was it was a hole in my game plan. So, for example, if my game plan is, or if I have no passing, if I feel like I cannot pass people's guard, my game plan needs to shift to either submissions off my back or sweeps that end me past the guard, sweeps that end me in side control, mount, or back takes, right? It doesn't make sense to go in and say, well, I need to be good at guard passing, even though I'm not right now. I need to, so I'm going to plan on trying to play top and pass people's guards. You want to go where you have the best chance to win. So when we're game planning, how I kind of think of it, and I'll explain how I have looked at it for Worlds coming up. It's like, I don't know, 5 weeks out, 6 weeks out, something like that. And what I like to do when I'm prepping is I like to say, okay, what big holes do I have in my game? And so what I do is I focus my game first. And so, I focus on a specific guard. Let's say it's collar sleeve. This isn't what I'm focused on. I'm not going to tell you guys my game plan for Worlds. I can't trust you guys. You guys would run to everybody in my division and rat me out on my game plan. But let's say collar sleeve is my game plan. And so collar sleeve usually generates a lot of omoplatas or triangles. And so I'm back to only doing triangles. I'm hitting a lot of them. Well, guess what? I start to go with certain people at the gym that can stop my triangle. And I don't have any other answer from collar sleeve. So what I can do is I can say, hey, I used to play double sleeve also. And so I look for a specific thing like, wow, when the guy's putting too much pressure and I can't play collar sleeve, I let go of the collar and I add my double sleeve. Maybe we think of it as you have a good butterfly guard and you're doing a lot of good sweeps from your butterfly guard, but you're starting to notice, wow, some people just come in when I'm trying to sweep them and they keep their head so low and they keep my hips so controlled that I cannot butterfly sweep them. Well, how we would complete our game, because that's a big hole in the game. If somebody just comes out with a specific game plan and I don't have an answer to it, I can most likely expect to lose. I don't want to have to be learning while I am on the mat competing, right? So though that guy's keeping his head low, well, maybe I add a loop choke. Now I've just, it's a really simple fix. It was a singular move, but I added it to my game to defend against when guys start to lead with their head too much and they're keeping too much pressure on me. Well, now I've kind of completed my game because now I have some good answers for guys that are leaning in. I have good answers for guys that are sitting back. Well, now what happens if they start to stand up? Do I have an answer for stand up? Can I get underneath this person for my X guard or my single leg X? Okay, let's say I get underneath them and I start to play my single leg X guard and I get my sweep. Well, now we've pretty much completed our game off of our back as a competitor. That doesn't mean it's perfect, but it means kind of the three main things that will happen. Either he's standing, he is on his knees and leaning forward, or he is on his knees and leaning back. I have an answer for now. And so you kind of just look at, with your game plan, what do I know? Is there anything really simple that people can do to stop it? How do I beat that? How do I make sure that I don't have these holes? And how do and I want to make sure I do it early. Something else you can do for game planning if you are higher level. I would not recommend this until you are somebody who maybe is at the blue belt level and could compete at like national world level blue belt, right? Somebody that could be able to place at big tournaments as a blue belt. This is when I think you should start to think about this. But even then, it might be too soon for a lot of people. Start to think about what you are or what your division is doing. I've been trying to do a day where I watch for 3 hours. I just watch my division. I go on Flow and I just watch the guys that are in my division for Worlds. And I make notes. Okay, this guy plays this a lot. This guy plays this a lot. Sometimes I make notes and go, this guy plays a similar guard to me, but he's doing something I don't do. I need to add that to my game. A lot of times, though, I say, wow, this is this guy's best position. Is there anything simple I could do to nullify it and make him play his second best game? Instead of going in with this guy has an excellent collar sleeve guard and I want to knee cut through his collar sleeve. I'll go in and say, hey, is there anything simple I could do to completely avoid this guy's collar sleeve? Could I just play off my back? It was his best position. Something, and I really love this. So you look at in professional football, in NFL, if you ever watch Bill Belichick, he's the coach of the New England Patriots, one of the most hated people in football. Something that he is known for, besides cheating and being hated, is he takes away your primary game plan, and he does it to everybody. For example, let's say you have a really great running back. He will dedicate his game plan, even if he's weak in other areas, he will dedicate his game plan to stopping your running back. Because if you don't have your main thing, your identity, especially in a highly competitive game, it is very mentally defeating, right? It is very frustrating when I want to play cross sleeve guard on somebody and they just will not let me touch their sleeve. Now, I think most people get single-minded and they say, this guy will not let me touch their sleeve. I can't play my guard. I'm going to lose. That's when you look at your game plan and you say, okay, if I can't control that cross sleeve, what could I do to either play something different or what could I do to get to that cross sleeve? Is there anything simple that I could do that I'm not thinking of? And a lot of times there are simple things. And so that's how we look at our game plan. Another little note, I don't usually write my game plan out. Sometimes it's helpful for people. Sometimes when you write stuff down, it puts it fresh in your mind. And I think that can be good. It's a preference thing, though. If you don't feel like someone who does that, sometimes it's just like when we're talking about a preparation, sometimes doing too much, it puts more pressure on you. And so sometimes we just keep our game plan simple. We just keep it in our head and we focus on it each night. That's the last little tip on game plan is I like 6 weeks. For me, that's my preparation for every tournament, the biggest tournaments, the smallest tournaments. It's always 6 weeks for me. And it is this. When you are game planning, you have to go out and play your game plan in the gym. You have to go out and play your game plan in the gym. I have been guilty of it. It's so easy to do. It's so easy to go with guys that you're better than in the gym and just mess around. And I think that can be fun, and it can actually be helpful sometimes when you're not getting ready to compete. But when you are getting ready to compete, you start to zone in. You start to limit the amount of jiu-jitsu that you play. It's not always going to be that you only play what you worked, in the gym. When you compete, sometimes you do have to pull a rabbit out of the hat. But generally, going in and just saying, okay, I want to play closed guard, and getting right into closed guard every round when you train will help you go in to compete and then be first and get right into closed guard. That is going to be my last little tip. Honestly, we could do this entire podcast on game plan, but I think that we've really covered enough on game plan, and I don't want to dive too deep and get confusing with it. Now, third layer of understanding the 5 layers of jiu-jitsu competition, understanding what people don't think about. This is the thing that nobody thinks about. Nobody freaking thinks about this when they go to compete. Competing is substantially more physical than the gym. You need to prepare for that. So we'll start with a simple example. When you watch No-Gi Worlds this year, if you watch No-Gi Worlds this year, you will find that there's just beatings. People are just pounding each other's heads with clubs, right? Like they're like clubbing on each other's heads so hard. Then even from like tight positions, they just beat each other down. Like it's very physical, right? Especially No-Gi. And so that is where you see a lot of the physicality in No-Gi is in the feet, right? But you will find even at a high level, being more physical, especially in No-Gi, wins so many matches. One of our training partners, Matt Green, he just won the worlds at purple belt. He won at super heavy, I think. And there was this point in one of his matches, I want to say it was a semifinal match, where a guy went for an underhook and Matt didn't whizzer. He didn't try to re-underhook. He stiff-armed the guy in the face. And stiff-armed or palm struck the guy in the face. And it jarred this dude's head so hard that he never even thought about going for that underhook again. It wasn't even that part. That underhook did not exist to this guy anymore because the level of physicality he was not prepped for. And I'm not saying that that's going to happen. Hopefully for your sake and for everyone's, you never have to fight Matt Green. But what I mean by that is like a lot of people just don't understand that jiu-jitsu competition is physical. I remember when I was like a blue and a purple belt, and I would go with guys and it'd be really tough matches, and I would just get blasted with a knee in the face, right? And it's like they don't apologize. They don't care. It's not their problem unless you're getting DQ'd or you're getting penalized for it. It's not your problem, right? And so understanding how physical competition is really important. We're going to talk about how you can actually prep yourself for that physicality in just a second. The other thing, it isn't just people hitting you, is people don't understand how hard it is to actually secure points on a guard pass, a sweep, or a takedown. People just will not accept the position. People will die to defend, to save those 2 points in jiu-jitsu competition. In the gym, if you pass one of your buddies, generally they go right into hands defending the neck, right into defensive mode, right? But when you are competing, people will do anything to keep from their guard to get past. And so something that you can do that is really helpful. One, you can just have training partners that train really physical and focus on training with them during competition time. I wouldn't recommend that as like the primary idea though, because people that train too physical a lot of times do get hurt. And so what you need to think about when you are training is like, okay, we're going to like play a game. Basically, we're going to drill this. I am going to hit a takedown on you. As soon as your butt touches, you're going to get up and you're going to do everything you can to get up. I'm going to do everything I can to secure the points. And you will find that physically it's pretty taxing to do that, but it is so good for you to learn where you're safe and where you're not. Because when you go to compete, sometimes you're used to people accepting position, and then you take somebody down, they bounce right back up, and you could have easily just sucked in their hips, just used basic jiu-jitsu technique to keep them down. But you're so not used to the position that you think, I need to muscle and explode and be strong. And then you're just as gassed as the person that you took down. So understanding what it is like to hold down somebody who absolutely will risk everything to not be held down, to secure a guard pass. You can do the same thing. I'm going to pass you, and then as soon as I get around your legs, you build your frames and see if you can get back. And so what you try to do on these really physical things, at least for me, I am not somebody who is capable of brutal physical output. It's just physically, I just noticed that I'm not capable of that. If I do, I seem to get more tired than the person I'm going with. And so it doesn't make sense for me to do it. I try to look at what could I do that is effortless to beat this aggressive physicality. But you do have to acknowledge that the physicality exists, and you cannot lie to yourself and just say, oh, technique conquers all. Hooray. Technique conquers all. You say that, but you see a lot of matches won by people that aren't as good, but are just meaner. They are just grittier, or they just have more cardio. And technique doesn't conquer all in those circumstances sometimes. And so the last thing I guess I'll say about physicality and to understand it is if you aren't capable of absorbing a lot of physicality, don't do no-gi. It is getting worse now that it is getting bigger. No-gi's really, really grown, but people are taking the same training idea that most people have in jiu-jitsu, which is be more explosive, be stronger, be bigger. And they're applying it to no-gi, and it's working, of course. Like they wouldn't be doing if it wasn't working. But man, the risk of injury in no-gi, I think we'll see it as it goes. It is going to get big. There's going to be a lot of injury in no-gi because of the way people are training, because of the way people are competing. You watch anything with like the high level guys now in no-gi, and it is just a 10-minute scramble. That stuff's so hard on your body. So if you're not wanting to absorb a lot of physical punishment, keep your gi on. Don't try to focus on competing in no-gi. It's just not worth it. So fourth on our layers, we will talk about warm-up. And this is something a lot of people talk about, a lot of people think about, but most people don't take seriously enough. Your warm-up can easily decide on whether or not you win the tournament. So a lot of times we can get away at the lower belts with not warming up. Maybe we're just better than everybody. We go out for a first match and we dominate, and that is our warm-up. But at a point, it always catches up to you. Because if you come into a match not warm and you have just a gritty, tough fight, even if you have great cardio, even if you recover very well, it is so hard to recover from that. Nothing is harder than recovering from a bad choice of round when you should have warmed up. You can test this at the gym. If you go with like your hardest round without a warm up at all and you just go hard, you will notice like, wow, I'm not feeling good here. I'm getting killed here. And, a lot of times we don't think about it, but the way a lot of the new school way of warming up in jiu-jitsu, and this is kind of what I do for like your classes, is you learn technique and you just drill technique over and over and you get warm. I I made a video or an episode years ago. No, not years ago, months ago. Man, my perception of time is a little off. But I made an episode months ago about how warm-ups are stupid. Jiu-jitsu warm-ups are stupid. Shrimping up and down the mats and things like that. They don't make sense. And man, I had a lot of people really upset about that. People wanted to fight me about that. But they had to warm up before they could fight me. So I would just jump on them and I would win that fight every time. Sorry, that was a dumb joke. But for our warm-ups, when we are looking at warming up, we're thinking about actually getting our body warm. And when we do that, it preps us so much to recover from our first match. I wouldn't say that it keeps you from getting exhausted in your first match. I don't know very many people that don't get exhausted in their first match. That's going to happen. You train to be able to do the whole match, even if you feel kind of crappy towards the end of it. And you also train to recover from that first match. And so what that looks like in the gym is really, really intense, hard rounds. And then, and they don't have to just be straight rounds. You can do like Shark Tank rounds where one person's in the middle and you're just trying to kill them. But then rest and then going back to training again. And usually rest like 5 minutes is all you'll need. You don't need to rest the same amount of time you would always rest at a tournament because that's just too inconsistent. But the endless round method of jiu-jitsu, I'm going to do 5-minute rounds with a 10-second rest and then just keep doing it forever. It doesn't give you a great feel on the pacing of the tournament. And if you guys want to know more about pacing, the episode that came out last week on the Patreon page is all about pacing. And the only way to get that is on the I Suck at Jiu-Jitsu Show's Patreon page, which I will have linked below. And we just talk about some simple methods to pace in your rounds and to pace better. That's my dog. He's a big fan of pacing. And he is also not a very big fan of our mailman. And so when we are looking at our warm up, when we're deciding that we are going to warm up, what we have to do is we have to create a system of warm up, something that works for us. And I'll go through my warm up for you guys. But remember, the goal is to be warm. The goal is to be warm. When we are warm, we are just able to compete at such a smoother and better level than when we are cold. And so, you just look at how much dexterity you have when it's cold outside versus like in your hands versus how much dexterity you have when it's warm outside. That doesn't change for jiu-jitsu competition. And so I want to make sure that I am warm. I also can use a warm-up to help me deal with nerves. And a lot of times our nerves are like adrenaline, right? And I can burn off a lot of adrenaline with a very hard warm-up. Don't warm up very hard unless you are in good shape. So we'll start with breathing because I talked about that before. We've talked about, I've had Miles Lucas on the show before, and that whole episode is on breathing. And honestly, for me and a lot of my students, it changed our perspective. I had Miles come in and do a Wim Hof breathing seminar, and it was really good. And all of us still use that to prep for, or most of us still use it to prep for competing. And it just is a really simple way to kind of calm you down. And it's the same thing though. What you're doing is you're forcing your body to deal with, like when we go out to compete, what happens is we start to breathe really hard, right? And we get our heart rate up and things start to rush. What we do is we force that to happen early on. And then your body gets used to that. It gets used to that big jump in intensity and kind of that big jump in oxygen. And so what you can do is there is a Wim Hof guided breathing. It's like 10 minutes. That's what I use before I compete. It's on YouTube. It's super, super easy to use. And it's just Wim guiding you through these breathing techniques. And man, I have found that has been the best thing for controlling my nerves. They still are there, but for some reason, they're just not as big of a deal after I do a few rounds of my breathing techniques. Usually I do those an hour out because I'm just trying to get my mind ready, right? Then at about 45 minutes out from when I'm supposed to compete, I get dressed, usually gi, and then I'll do a hoodie over the gi. And then if it's kind of cold, I'll even do like a big pair of sweatpants over my gi pants. Have shoes on, be warm. I don't care for flip flops when I'm competing. I don't want frozen toes. One time I had this horrific toe injury in competing, and ever since then, I've been super, super adamant about being warm when I compete. And but for our warm up, what we can do a lot of times is a jog. Just a light jog will get you sweaty sometimes. As you get in better shape, though, it stops to happen. You stop getting sweaty. You stop getting exhausted from a jog because you're just in such good shape. Your body's used to that. So what I like to supplement with, or what I like to add to that, is burpees. I think like doing them in sets of 10. I'm not trying to win the CrossFit games or anything. I'm just trying to get movement, right? And then also like standing up straight. I always just call these knee-ins. I don't know why I don't know if that's a proper term, but standing up straight, bringing one knee just up as high as you can with your leg bent, and then opening up. So bringing it straight up to my chest, and then like I'm bringing my right leg up to my chest, and then I extend my right knee as far as I can to my right shoulder, almost like just making that my knee do a big circle. And then I put my foot to the floor, and then I do the other side. And warming up your hips, that is going to be huge for jiu-jitsu competition. That is what we use in almost every movement of jiu-jitsu. Is we're either defending our hips, we're trying to get to their hips, or we're using our hips to create strength or create power. And so warming up your hips is super important. When I say that, like, you want your butt to feel warm when you go and loose when you go to compete. And then the other thing to warm up is your grips. Your grips will burn out so bad if you do not warm them up. What I found is doing just hand opens, meaning I close my hand like a fist, and then I extend all my fingers and my thumb as open and as spread as I can, and then I close it again. So I do those. I want to say that I got this from Lloyd Irvin. But I do those like in a set. You'll notice it's hard to even do it for 30 seconds straight, doing it pretty quick and really extending your hands and really opening them up, but you start to get them warm. Then the second thing I'll do with my grips is I'll hold my lapels and squeeze really hard for 5 seconds, and then loosen my grip for 5 seconds, and squeeze really hard, and then loosen my grip. And all I'm waiting for, I'm just doing this by feel. This isn't a thing where I go, oh, I've done this many reps and that means I'm warm. Sometimes the venue has a 15-degree shift. It could be, like it's much harder to warm up in 60 degrees than it is in 75. Also, other little note about warm up. If it is nice outside where I'm going, always warm up outside. It is so much easier to get a sweat going if it's hot outside. And so that is going to be big on warm up. And then the last little thing, and this isn't warm up, but I figured it's the only place to talk about it, is your in between match movement. So do you stretch in between matches? Do you do jumping jacks in between matches? What do you do? Sometimes we have these long layoffs in between matches. One of the easiest things that I have found, and this works like a charm, is I sit for 3 to 5 minutes, and then I stand and walk around for 3 to 5 minutes. And then I do that over and over. When you sit for 30 minutes after competing and then you go to stand up, you get a horrible head rush and you do not feel like competing anymore. So as I do that, I'm sitting and I'm standing, I'm sitting, I'm standing. I can still do those same hip movements. I can still do some burpees. I can still do some grip movement. But all I'm trying to do is keep my body warm. Don't overthink warming up for competing. Understand what it is. It is warming up your body. And so just adding that if you didn't take anything else from this, just adding a good warm up will help you compete so much better. And then the last part, and this is probably going to be the thing that is Yeah, we'll talk about the longest. And this is the underlying goals of competing. Okay. So the first thing when we're talking about the goals of competing, when we set a goal to compete, what's fun is we can have some small goals to lead us there. So I have 8 weeks before my tournament and I'm not good at any takedowns. I want to get good at one takedown. That's all I want to do, right? That's a fun little goal that I get to set before I compete. And then I get to go and try it and see if I can get my takedown. But the main goal of competition, we talked about this a second ago. The main goal of competition is to win. This is so important to understand. The main goal is not to submit your opponent. The main goal is not to prove that leg locks work or they don't work. The main goal is not that. The main goal is to win. That is why you sign up. The person that wins the tournament gets to be at the top of the podium, not the person that, well, no one submitted me, so it didn't, so I didn't really lose. No, you lost. You entered a tournament that has a certain rule set. It is not a fight. It is not, I'm not saying that jiu-jitsu tournaments are not like fighting. I'm saying it is not a no rules fight. It is not a fight. So it is not about anything but winning. Don't put it about pride. Don't put it about, well, I hate this guy that's in my division, so I have to beat him. Don't add those things to competing. Just go out and win. This is why wrestlers seem to do so well in jiu-jitsu competition, even up till purple belt, brown belt, even a black belt. Guys that have wrestled before, it's such a nice thing to have understood that it's about winning. The reason wrestlers understand that more than jiu-jitsu guys understand that is because in wrestling, their version of submission is a pin, right? The higher of a level you get to, the less you see people getting pinned. People are just good at defending the pin. And so they're really good at bellying out. So when I tell one of my wrestlers, like, hey, yeah, obviously submissions win you the match immediately, they're cool with that. But like, wait, I could score 2 points and then I can stay on top and I can win the match. Yeah, I'll just do that. And I know you guys got nervous. I know you're sitting in the car and your butt cheeks just clenched up because you're like, oh no, Josh is talking about stalling. He's talking about stalling. Oh no, there is so much fear in jiu-jitsu about stalling. Don't stall. If you stall, Grandmaster Elio will roll over in his grave. Dude, practice stalling. Get good at it. You're going to get called on it. Learn to work the rules. Learn to win matches. Strategy is just as important, if not more, when you go out and compete than having a good guard, than having good takedowns, than having a good top game. Strategy is one of the most important factors of jiu-jitsu competition. You look at guys like Nicky Rod as a blue belt winning or getting second at ADCC. You honestly believe that Nicky Rod has better pure jiu-jitsu than Muhammad Ali and Cyborg? No, he doesn't, at least at that time. Maybe he does now. But at that time, he definitely didn't. I guarantee you he would have told you he didn't. But he had the right strategy. He had the right game plan. And that's why he got the silver medal and they didn't. So you go out, you focus on your underlying goal, which is to win. Don't get that confused. It's so easy to get that confused when you're getting ready to compete. I want to win by submission. I want to win by this submission. And that's like all fine and dandy, but a lot of times it causes you to lose. And then you don't get to show any of the jiu-jitsu that you worked on because these tournaments are single elimination usually, and you're done for the day. So when we're going out, we have our underlying goal of winning. Our secondary goal, I think, should always be developing a specific skill. So physicality, that's a skill. Warm up, that's a skill. You do this more, you will get better at it. That makes it a skill. So when we're think about which skill you want to develop. It's so important to go in and say, I want to get better at a skill. I pointed this out to my students. One of our black belts, Justin, who's been on the show, competed twice. And one of the times he felt like his warm up wasn't good. He felt like his mental prep for the tournament wasn't good. And his next tournament, that was what he focused on. And guess what? Of course, he did a million times better at the tournament. But he also came away with a skill that he can apply every time he competes. So when we think about skill development for every individual tournament, whether that is our mindset, I'm going to try a new mindset, whether that's the routine we make, the music we listen to, the dinner we have before we compete, I want to always be perfecting my competition routine. Because if you want to be a competitor, you want to have some volume in your competition. Like that is something that I really enjoy doing, is getting to compete a lot in a short period of time. And what you do then is you create this routine and you say, this is the routine that I am going to stick with. Some other things you can do with your underlying goals. And I would base your goals off of either what you feel like you're already pretty decent at and you feel like you could develop to be like great at, or what you feel like you are bad at. And a lot of times that is what we focus on when we compete. I feel like I go out and I freeze up. Well, what I do is I say, what skill could I develop? How could I figure out a way to develop this skill of stopping freezing up? Well, when you freeze up, when you compete, it is because you put too much pressure on yourself. It is always the same reason. You expect yourself to do so good. You expect to win. You expect to win. I have to win. And then you forgot to do jiu-jitsu, man. You forgot that this tournament is a jiu-jitsu tournament. You focus too much on making weight. You focus too much on something other than jiu-jitsu. So what you do, you feel like you're somebody who struggles with that. I freeze up. So I want you, and this is advice from Eric Hubner, who is on the show twice. He was on the show. I think this is the second time he was on the show where we talk mainly about competition and mental prep. And he gave some really good advice. He says you should think about your first three moves. So for example, for me, my first three moves, if I am stressed about competition, will be collar grip, guard pull, right into my first sweep. And I will drill that. I will do that in training all the time. I will make it like I want it to be annoying to my students, to my training partners, everybody I go with. Man, Josh does this every single time. It's so annoying. And it's going to start to even get beat. But what you do is you understand when you go to compete, this person hasn't been training against your collar grip, sweep single, and guard pass, or whatever your three moves are. So what you do is you go out and you score, you get on the board. If you get on the board for whatever reason, that stress, it starts to melt away. That freeze upness, it starts to melt away. Then, hey, remember your underlying goal. Stall out, win that match, dude. Just because I know I'll get a little bit of flack for telling people that they should stall in jiu-jitsu. I remember the first time I heard this was my coach was at, I don't think it was a seminar. I think they were in Brazil for some reason, and they were hanging out with Royler Gracie. And someone was talking about stalling in jiu-jitsu, and Royler said, hey, what did I win the finals of my first world championship with? And nobody knew. And he said, you see how that doesn't matter? He said, but I did bring a gold medal home from the world championships. And so you go out to win, not to do any other thing, not to have any other opinions on, I'm going to show what jiu-jitsu is. You go out to win. Always think win first when you are competing. And your secondary thought should be skill development. And last little thing I'll talk about when we're talking about our underlying goals, when we're talking about skill development, and we're talking about strategy especially, is try your best as you progress as a competitor. This is not like, hey, try your best for competition one, but just try your best as you develop as a competitor to have two strategies. And I think that is, like I said, my goal when I'm competing is to nullify the person's primary goal. That is what I try to do. And it's a lot of times it's because I feel like I'm well-rounded enough in jiu-jitsu. I feel like I can wrestle with pretty much anybody. I can play on top with pretty much anybody. I can play on bottom with pretty much anybody. I'll say my bottom game is my best. So if I am, wanting to go where I want to go, I want to be on bottom. But I'm going with a guy who I know is like one of the best passers in the world. Well, I'm going to try to wrestle that person, most likely. It just doesn't make sense to put them in their best spot right at the beginning of the match by pulling guard quickly. So when we're talking strategy, having two strategies is really important. I think when it comes to a coach, having a coach that knows what your strategy is doesn't have to mean you know what techniques you're going to use, but just know that I'm going to try to play close guard for like the first 2 minutes of the match. Knowing that it was so helpful as a coach, because you can, as a coach, not have to be yelling like, hey, you've got to move, you got to do something. I know you wanted to keep your guard closed. You wanted to slow things down. And so I can coach you on that. So having a strategy, having secondary goals, which are skill development, and having your primary goal, which is winning. That is what we're looking at when we're thinking about the underlying goals of competing. So those are our 5 layers of BJJ competition. Like I said, if you guys want to hear about kind of the 6th layer of BJJ competition, pacing, and how to get good at it, you can check out the Patreon page. I will link it in the description. But that's all I have for you guys today. Hope you guys like this episode. And that is the episode. Today was the first episode that I've done kind of from a vault. I've been trying to record these solo episodes, at least, doing them just straight through, writing down what I plan on talking about, doing them straight through, and then just saving them for when I need to publish a new episode. And I really like this one because sometimes I get going on a rant with enough caffeine that I say something that I re-listen to and I go, oh, that's good. I should remember that. And I felt like that had a few nuggets on this one. I hope you guys like this episode. I don't really know how many people that I have that listen to the show that are competitors versus non-competitors. Those are things that that are really impossible for me to know unless you guys let me know. So you could always just send me a message on Instagram at the Josh McKinney. I always read everything that is sent to me. Usually people send me questions and I respond through Instagram. Sometimes the questions are really in depth and really good. And so instead of responding through, just responding back through Instagram, I will make whole episodes on it. So, send me some episode ideas. It's always nice. I always enjoy talking to people and I always like to ask them at the end, hey, any ideas for a new episode? Most of the time, they just had them in their back pocket. And a lot of the time, they're really good. People just don't give me those ideas. Let me know. I want to know what you guys want to hear about. It's always fun to hear from you guys. But that is all I have for you guys today. Next week, as long as I'm actually recording it like tomorrow as the time I'm filming this. But hopefully next week there will be an episode out with one of the Dirty Dozen. Maybe one you haven't not heard of too. And so if you guys don't know what the Dirty Dozen are, they are the 12 original non-Brazilian jiu-jitsu black belts. And so that will be really interesting as long as we get it recorded, as long as we get everything done and scheduled perfectly. And so that is all I have for you guys today, though. Hope to see you guys next week. Hope you guys keep enjoying the show. As always, if you have any questions, send me an email, send me a message. I would love to hear from you. If you have not yet, be sure to subscribe to the Patreon page. You will not be discouraged. You will not feel like you are not getting enough bang for your buck. You will enjoy it. And hope you guys do sign up for that Patreon page. And I hope that you guys like today's episode. I hope today's episode helps you guys suck just a little bit less at jiu-jitsu. Have a great day, guys. What's up, guys? Josh here again. I just wanted to give you a little more information on some of the other content that I produce that isn't just the I Suck at Jiu-Jitsu show. If you are wanting more information on how to become more efficient and effective in your jiu-jitsu training, the number one thing that I always recommend to people is my Patreon page, the I Suck at Jiu-Jitsu show Patreon page, because we release a 5 to 15 minute exclusive episode every single Saturday. This is called Suck Less Saturday, and it is completely focused on being for your jiu-jitsu training, for your jiu-jitsu mindset, and for your jiu-jitsu progression. And so what we'll do is a quick but deep dive on a different thought, idea, or training method every single Saturday. And you can only get this on our Patreon page. I also have a few spots open, depending on what time you're listening to this podcast, for my Suck Less coaching. What that is a monthly cost to get a monthly meeting with me where we meet over Zoom and set some goals based on what you are trying to accomplish in jiu-jitsu and set some different training methods to help you get there. There's nothing like this online right now. There is no jiu-jitsu coaching that teaches you how you should be training, and it is exclusively on the I Suck at Jiu-Jitsu Patreon page. Also, if you guys want to just be in more contact or you want to learn a little more about my ideas in jiu-jitsu, I highly recommend that you sign up for Simplifying Jiu-Jitsu. It is a free ebook. It is at simplifyingjujitsu.com. And what we do is we break down the top 5 positions, the essential 5 positions of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. These are the 5 positions where most Jiu-Jitsu, 90+% of Jiu-Jitsu takes place in. And we break down how to train them, how long you should be training them, and what order you can train these things to progress faster and easier with your jiu-jitsu. And lastly, if you guys would just give this show a subscribe and a share, it would be very greatly appreciated. Also, you can review us on certain podcast platforms. If you guys want to keep up with me personally, you can follow me at my Instagram at @thejoshmckinney. That's all I have for you guys today. Thank you for listening. I hope that you guys listen to the next one.